Hi, and welcome in this video. I'd like to introduce you to a fascinating Japanese method to which I was lucky enough to be trained along with doctors, physiotherapists, and osteopaths. I don't practice it professionally, but I'm passionate about it, and through this video, I would like to share this discovery because it gave me a very different lighting over the health and back problems I had since my childhood. This method is based on the readjustment of the hip bones. I'm almost sure that you're going to recognize yourself in this video because only 0.1% of the population has a balanced hip. So unless you're part of the lucky ones, I'm sure you will feel concerned. Everything I say in this video is taken out of the book written by the creator of Yumeiho, which is Masayuki Sayonji. Normally, a human being is supposed to stand straight. So half of the body weight should be on his left leg and the other half on the right leg. But this is only in a perfect world. The legs and the spine are connected to each other by a bone which is called the hip bone or the iliac bone. Here it's indicated in green. The red dot shows approximately the junction with the spine, and the blue dot shows the junction with the leg. But there is one interesting thing. If we look at our skeleton from the side, and if you observe again the hip bone and the two junctions, we realize that the junctions are not on the same vertical axis, they are shifted. Imagine that this skeleton, in its childhood, was running down some stairs and had the brilliant idea to jump over the last 3 or 4 stairs and land on its right leg, for example. What actually may happen? Due to the intensity of the impact, it's possible that the red junction will surrender a little bit, and this will generate a tilt of the right hip bone, just like that. Very, very little, actually, be reassured, but that very, very little tilt around the red axis will make that the blue dot will move slightly to the front of the body and up, and it may end up somewhere around purple dot here. What's the result? Virtually, the right leg will seem shorter than the left leg as it's been moved up, sometimes even up to 1 inch. This is problematic, and we'll see later on the consequences that this might have. So, as we told before, such a displacement may happen due to a fall or a violent impact on the floor, for example with a parachute or when you jump from the top of a low wall, etc., etc. But mostly it happens much, much earlier, during child delivery. That's why this problem concerns about 999 people out of 1,000. Indeed, the mechanical constraints imposed on the muscles and on the iliac bones of the baby during his progression in the vagina are very, very intense, while his body is still very fragile. After a displacement happens, in the first place, as the person will be standing, since their right leg is virtually shorter due to the hip bone displacement, automatically the lower back will have to twist according to the red line you see on the screen. It will be higher on the left side and lower on the right side. So, the lower part of the spine will be twisted according to the purple axis. Then, so that the person wouldn't be completely bent, the body will have to compensate and create a flexion of the spine a little higher. This will tend to tilt the shoulders, as it is shown on the screen. So, the head should be perpendicular to the shoulders, which means bent. Since the body doesn't like that, the head will tend to tilt to the right to compensate. And it may be the beginning of a scoliosis. The spine is the most vulnerable part of the human body, but also one of the most critical parts. It suffers even during the most common efforts of the everyday life. But that's not all. Since the right leg is shorter, it's hard to lean on it. So it's the whole center of gravity of the body that shifts to the left, and then the person puts much more weight on their left leg. If the person weighs 200 pounds, there should be about 100 pounds on each leg. But because of the displacement, sometimes it's even possible that there will be 120 pounds on the left leg and only 80 pounds on the right leg. Then the consequences follow. Because the right hip bone is displaced, the whole right side of the body will be under tension by reaction. The muscles will be much more tensed, much more rigid, and mostly the right leg will be less irrigated with blood because of all the contractions. The muscles and the ligaments will weaken, and it will have an impact on the drainage of the blood and the lymph, which is dynamized by healthy muscle contractions and movements. Various diseases can be explained by those chronic displacements. Actually, all the organs located on the right side of the body will suffer because of those tensions. Imagine what your liver must endure if it's constantly compressed by muscle tensions caused by the structure of a deformed body. And it's a vicious circle, because the more weight you put on the left side, the more the right side will tighten to compensate, and the more the deformation will accentuate, with all the functional and organic problems that this may generate. Moreover, the spinal nerves will get irritated and inflamed because of the deformation of the spine and because of the vertebral displacements. The spinal nerves ensure the innervation of almost all the human body. So, when they are irritated, it makes almost inevitable the occurrence of motor, digestive, respiratory, heart, gynecologic, neurovegetative, or endocrine troubles. So it may cause leanness, obesity, headaches, etc., etc. In a moment, we will cover the most common problems that can be met. But before that, just a slight detail. The images that I show you are willingly exaggerated in the deformations. But you must be aware that in reality, a barely visible difference of only 1/3 of an inch between the left and the right leg can cause a major imbalance in the structure of the body. Frequently, in the beginning, the symptoms may remain latent during a very long time, years or even decades. An imbalance doesn't necessarily mean that there will be detrimental consequences on health, but it will increase the risks of developing osteoarticular, neurologic, digestive, or gynecologic diseases. But someday, much later on, there may be an aggravation of the imbalance, perhaps due to an effort, or even a stress, or a malposition imposed to the body after a contrariety. And this may provoke a sometimes brutal outbreak of the symptoms, which are sometimes severe from the start. It's here that a connection between a physical problem and a psychological conflict arises. One or the other may then be connected to a displacement of the hip, because of all the elements we quoted before. For those same reasons, it's wise to detect early a displacement of the hip and to correct it without waiting in order to avoid to be confronted to a disease which would be much harder to deal with, according to Masayuki Sayonji. Moreover, replacing the bones of the pelvis is not enough, because if the muscles and the tissues all around don't retrieve their elasticity, the pelvis will not remain in the right position for long. That's why the Yumeiho technique is aimed at replacing the bones as well as softening the muscles. This also explains that working on the vertebrae only is not enough. If you want to treat the cause of the problem, you need to reposition the pelvis, because it's the pelvis that enforces its balance to the spine. If the pelvis is twisted, it's mechanically impossible for the spine to be straight. Our society forces us to live in an environment which is not very healthy, and this is considered to be normal. Unbalanced diets, permanent stress, lack of movement, etc. When some parts of the body don't move enough, the muscles get atrophied and the joints get stiff. The body loses its vitality. Concerning the lower limb, low back pain and knee weakness marks the beginning of the first symptoms. The human body rests entirely on the legs. If one is too weak, the other will have to bear more weight, as we already told. If both lack strength, the body will swing from one to the other in a very disharmonious rhythm. In all the cases, the pelvis will get more and more unbalanced. The vicious circle starts because the displacement of the iliac bones increases the weakness of the lower limb. Let's see the most common symptoms met when there is a right hip bone displacement. We may recall that it will give the impression that the right leg is shorter. Thus, it will be less sollicitated, and so it will tend to get weaker, because the weight of the body will be mainly on the side of the longest leg, which means on the left side. As we told before, all the right side of the body will be under tension with circulatory problems, etc., etc. The most common physical symptoms are leanness, frequent diarrheas, indigestions, painful periods, uterus problems like cysts or fibromas, gynecological disorders, even sterility, urinary tract infections, disorders in all the organs located on the right side, like the eye, the nostril, the sinus, the ear, and also premature gray hair. And now let's see the most common symptoms met when there is a left hip bone displacement. We may recall that it will give the impression that the left leg is shorter. Thus, it will be less sollicitated, and so it will tend to get weaker, because the weight of the body will be mainly on the side of the longest leg, which means on the right side. As we told before, all the left side of the body will be under tension with circulatory problems, etc., etc. The most common physical symptoms are obesity, because the digestive organs are under tension and don't assimilate food as well, sensitivity to cold, like bronchitis, pneumonia, frequent constipation, respiratory disorders, heart fragility, failing immunity, higher risk of diabetes because the pancreas is under constant tension, disorder in all the organs located on the left side, like the ear, the nostril, the sinus, the ear, etc., and also baldness. Later on, when a displacement is present, the years and the structural compensations will make that the actual deformation will increase, and it will also generate deformations on the opposite side. It becomes an even worse vicious circle, and there will be a combination of the right and left hip bone displacement symptoms. Hence again, the importance of fixing those problems as soon as possible. This Yumeiho technique comes from a culture where prevention is considered essential in order to limit curative expenses. The opposite of the Western society, actually. According to Masayuki Saionji, we don't know precisely the causes of the majority of neurovegetative troubles, and there is still no real efficient treatment for those. Very often, people take painkillers to erase and forget about their pain. But we know the risks of addiction to those drugs, as well as their side effects. Drugs are not a lasting solution because the initial problem worsens, and also because of the physical and psychic side effects induced by the drugs. Still, according to Masayuki Saionji, Yumeiho is the only method that really heals neurovegetative troubles. It restores the structural and functional balance of the human body. It's important to know that the sessions should not be stopped when the symptoms disappear. It's essential to continue the sessions until all the bones and muscles are in place. Otherwise, the former problems may reappear or new troubles may break out. Often also, after the first few sessions, the symptoms may worsen during a short period of time, and other symptoms may appear. It's normal, and it's actually what we look for, because if a structure which used to be twisted during years gets straight, automatically many muscles which were underused will have to start working again, and they will generate pain. And areas which used to be painless may become sensitive. Above all, Yumeiho being a holistic approach, it doesn't require neither diagnostics nor medical exams before being applied. It's an extremely safe technique because the various elements of the body framework find progressively their place thanks to the new dynamics set up by the progressive repositioning of the pelvis. Now, if I have one advice to give to you, it is to get interested in it, because it's really worth it. I don't have anything to earn on it because I don't practice it professionally. I learned it for myself and for my family and friends. Anyway, personally, I finally understood all the health and back problems that I had since my childhood. It really made sense to me, and that's why I chose to take care of myself, to correct my own problems and stop letting increase my back deformations. And the sooner you get interested in it, the easier and the faster you can correct the imbalances. So if you have kids or teenagers, now is the best moment to invest in your health. Goodbye.